If I had wanted to just make the most amount of money, I would have stayed on the path I was on. What I care about is impact. I can't imagine something more enriching.
Sahil Bloom is a New York Times bestselling author of The 5 Types of Wealth, a book that totally redefines what success really means.
I had spent the first 7 years of my career marching down the very traditional path. You work hard, you get the house, the car, the things that you're supposed to want. And unfortunately, along that path, while I was winning the one very traditional game, a lot of these other areas of my life had started to suffer. My relationships, my health. I went out for a drink with an old friend, and he asked how often I saw my parents. And I admitted that it was down to about once a year. And he just looked at me and said, "Okay, so you're going to see your parents 15 more times before they die." And in that moment, I realized that my entire definition of success had been incomplete. The worst thing in the world is not being on a bad path. The worst thing in the world is being on a good path that isn't yours. So whenever I advise anyone on making a change in their life, first thing I say is,
Sahil, thank you for being here.
"Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled."
Oh, it's going to be epic. It's going to be such a good conversation because I feel like everything you talk about, it's like I was listening to your book. I'm like, oh my God, yes. Oh my God, yes. So it was just like, oh, this is so good. So, but I will take you, like there was, like right at the beginning, you said the math that changed your life. Take me there. What is that math?
In May of 2021, I had a single conversation that really changed the entire course of my life. I was, at the time, working in the world of finance. I had spent the first 7 years of my career marching down the very traditional path. I say traditional in quotes, the traditional path towards a successful life, again in quotes. The path that you're told is the one you should want. You get the job that sounds prestigious and high status. You put your head down, you work hard, and you get, your pay raises, your bonuses, you get the house, the car, the things that you're supposed to want. And one day you're supposed to wake up and just feel fulfilled and everything's good and you're kind of in this idyllic land of success. And I had marched down that path and achieved those things that we are told we're supposed to want. And at every single marker of achievement, when I thought I was going to wake up with that sensation of fulfillment and happiness and contentment, it was nowhere to be seen. And I really just had this very familiar sensation, this familiar dread of never doing enough, of never having enough, of there always being some new thing that I had to go do, and making my happiness continuously conditional on achieving whatever that next thing was. And unfortunately, along that path, while I was winning the one very traditional game, a lot of these other areas of my life had started to suffer. My relationships, my health, mental and physical, a bunch of areas of my life were starting to show cracks. And it all came to a head in this one conversation. It was May of 2021. I went out for a drink with an old friend. And we sat down and he asked how I was doing. And I told him that it had started to get difficult living so far away from my parents. They were on the East Coast. We were living in California, 3,000 miles away. I had started to notice for the first time that they were slowing down, that they weren't going to be around forever. And he asked how old they were. And I said mid-60s. And he asked how often I saw them. And I admitted that it was down to about once a year. And he just looked at me and said, "Okay, so you're going to see your parents 15 more times before they die." And I just remember feeling like I had been punched in the gut. The idea that the amount of time you have left with the people you care about most in the world is that finite and countable, that you can place it onto a few hands, really just shook me to the core. And in that moment, I realized that my entire definition of success, of what it meant to build a wealthy life, had been incomplete, that I had been focusing on the one thing at the expense of everything else.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm getting chills. My family is back in Israel. So obviously, that hit home, right? So, I mean, everything you say. So, but let's go back in time. I want to hear, Sahil, like when you grew up, talk me to, you talk a little bit about your parents, but take us there for a second. Like, how did you grow up?
Yeah, I come from a mixed race background. So my mom was born and raised in Bangalore, India. And my father was born and raised in a Jewish household in the Bronx, New York. And I think that the idea of this rejection of common convention was very much hardwired into my family's DNA. And that was sparked by my parents, who met in a very unlikely turn of circumstance. My mom had sort of applied in secret to come to university in the United States against her parents' wishes. My dad had this whole life planned out for him by really an overbearing, kind of domineering father
Right.
figure. My dad was kind of his like golden child. And my parents crossed paths by 2 weeks at Princeton University in, I guess it was 1980. And my mom asked my dad out on a date, which is always a very funny story because they went out on this first date. And during the date, my dad said to my mom, my father will never accept us. And my mom was so blinded by his use of the word us that
Us.
that she completely missed the message. And unfortunately, my dad was right. His father was not accepting of
Right.
this idea of his son marrying this Indian woman,
Right.
and told him he had to choose between my mom and his family. And
And
my
he
dad
did.
walked out the door and never saw his
Crazy.
family again. And to this day, I
Oh
never
my
met my
God.
dad's parents. He has 3
Wow.
siblings I've never met. I have first cousins out there somewhere that I never met. And, when I reflect on that, I
That's
really just think
crazy.
about the fact that they sort of set this course or this standard of carving your own path into the earth, of rejecting the path that's been handed to you, questioning it at the very least, and choosing love ultimately
Right.
against all odds. And
Anything. Right.
yeah, and
And
the
crazy. Yeah.
crazy, totally crazy. And the legacy and the ripple effect of that is hard to overstate. But what I will say is that while that may have been in my DNA, it took a long time to actually manifest in my
Find it.
actions and in reality. Because on the surface, I would say that my family and I as a kid experienced very traditional pressures coming from a, half Indian, half Harvard
Right.
professor family, right? My dad works at Harvard. He's
Right.
a
Right.
professor there
Right.
for a long time. My mom is from India. Very academically oriented household, where we measured success on the basis of grades and on the
Right.
basis of these, standard achievements of like building towards, again, the standard definition of a successful life,
But
which,
that is standard. That is what education does, right? I mean, I
yeah.
have kids in high school now. Like that's how we measure.
Yeah, and I think that immigrants in particular, the kind of definition of the like American dream for a lot of immigrants that
Right.
come to the country is
Right.
that you can work really hard, get your degrees at these amazing institutions, and then go get a stable job where you're allowed to get a house and you're allowed to have kids
And a
and you can
six
take care of
figure,
them
yeah,
and a six-figure
exactly.
income. And that is an amazing life. And there's nothing wrong with that life, by the way. It's incredible. But I think in a lot of ways, like that is the path that kind of gets handed to you as like, oh, that is the only way to live. You have to go down and do
Right.
this thing. And look, to be totally honest, like, but neither one of my parents is particularly entrepreneurial. Like, my dad's a tenured professor, very safe, risk averse track. Both of my parents, I would say, are very risk averse in their wiring. And so I did
Right.
not grow up with this idea of like entrepreneurship, go create my own thing. And
Right.
so when I was going to school, when I was going to take my first job, a lot of what was in my head was, okay, like what's the path that sets me up for the stable track to living the good life? And
Success.
yeah, and to
Exactly.
me, that was
Yeah.
about money. It was like, well, I had a bunch of rich friends. What do their dads do? I have a good degree. I went to Stanford. I played baseball. Like I had these things going for me.
Right.
So why don't I go take that as the track, and then my life will be good, and everything will kind of work out on the basis of the idea that money is the path to living that good life.
Right. And let's go there for a second because you did go to Stanford. Why you studied public policy and then economics? So like, why did you choose these things? What was your thinking?
I wish I had like a very good
Curious.
reason for this. So I played baseball. I got a baseball scholarship to
Right.
Stanford. I would not have gotten into Stanford if not for the fact that I could throw a baseball pretty hard at one point in my life. Not anymore. And baseball was for me, my whole childhood, sort of my way of escaping the academic expectations of my parents. I have an older sister, very academically oriented. She was always the high achieving one, and I was always kind of the like ne'er-do-well younger brother. And baseball for me was the outlet to say, I am good at something else. My sister's going to be the academic one. I can be the one that's good at sports. And fortunately, I was good enough and hard enough working at it that I was able to get a scholarship that got me into a great school.
I mean, that's amazing. Yeah.
It was very lucky in a lot of ways. Times have changed in that regard, but I think it worked out. And
Right.
when I was studying at first, my economics degree undergrad, I was like, I thought I was going to go play professional baseball. I had that like youthful naivete that I think a lot of young athletes have, which is like, I'm the best. I can go make a bunch of money doing this thing. I'll be famous. All those things that you think you want. And it took me several years at Stanford to realize that I wasn't all that good. I probably wasn't going to be able to play on that level long term, at least. The public policy degree for me, the master's that I did in public policy, I stayed an extra year at Stanford, a fifth year. And the biggest reason for that degree in particular was that it had the most flexible mandate in terms of the courses that you could take. So what I said was like, okay, I'm going to stay an extra year and do another degree, but I want to be able to take whatever pulls my energy and interest because I want to just explore academically. I've never been able to because I was always so focused on baseball. And that degree was amazing in its capacity to allow me to explore.
That's incredible. And I will go back to the baseball because I think lessons that you get from sports are so relevant to everything in life. Can you what do you think are some of the things that you took from the sports?
Oh gosh, it's hard to even count all of the lessons. Right. I mean, I think the number one from baseball is this level of resilience that comes from recognizing that failure is much more an opportunity than an end destination. Because in baseball, I was a pitcher. You fail a lot, and the ability to fail, not lose confidence in yourself, and come back the next day with that same level of energy and intensity and enthusiasm, that is a trait that you never lose in life, and it is a trait that the vast majority of people lack. A lot of people, when they experience a failure, they may say, oh, I'm going to learn from it, but their confidence is fundamentally harmed irreparably.
Yeah.
And the best baseball players I knew, the ones who really made it, actually, they had an almost irrational, bordering on delusional ability to have a terrible performance on the most public stage and walk away from the field into the locker room thinking they were God's gift to baseball. It blew my mind. Across all athletes I knew, the ones who were the most successful had that. Like, they always had this ability to like just completely separate from the performance and just say, oh, that was total fluke. Like, I'm not bad. That's just what it was. And that I think is a real lesson. The other one, which I think few people really talk about, is playing a team sport at a high level. You have to learn to get along with and work with a variety of types of people, backgrounds, and experiences.
That's true.
And, in the day and age that we live in today, when polarization, I would argue, is at an all-time high, and when social media and the algorithms and the technologies that control our life are designed to tear us apart, the ability to hear someone's perspective that differs from yours, not immediately judge them for it, and see more of the sort of commonalities and be able to understand why someone might think that, see the human on the other side of it.
Huge.
That is a powerful trait for living a compassionate and empathetic and happy life in a world that is trying to make you hateful constantly. And so I don't know that maybe helps me constantly in business, but it certainly helps me for living a fulfilling and just happier existence.
That's incredible. And I do see that commonality, even in the podcast, even myself, between sports, between, just getting back up and everything, but grit, tenacity, etc. But now from Stanford, you go to private equity, if I'm not mistaken, right? And starting to kind of rise up those ranks. And like you said, right, you're starting to tick the boxes of, oh my God, I'm living the life. And I assume initially it does feel that way. Like I felt that way initially, like you're kind of on this horse of success. What do you feel? When did you start feeling like maybe this is changing? Maybe this is not enough?
I think the first probably 3 years, I was extraordinarily fulfilled. And a big part of that is because I am fulfilled by progress and growth as a person. I think most people are. And the learning curve in those early years of working in an industry is extraordinary. the things you have to learn, the opportunities you get, the experiences. I was working with a great group of people that I love to this day. I love. And there were so many opportunities and people and networks, and just like it was drinking from a fire hose, 80 to 100-hour weeks, working hard and deploying my discipline and intensity into something new. I previously, for the first 22 years of my life, that was baseball. That was taken away from me. And I had this new thing that I could channel all of that into. And so I would just I was loving it in a lot of ways in those early years. And yeah, as you said, money buys happiness in those early years of your career in life. I don't think any science will tell you otherwise. It is very clear. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs to some extent. As you come up that early curve, early in your career in life, money directly buys happiness. I didn't have to stress about bills anymore. I could afford some vacations with my fiance. Life meaningfully improved in those early years of making more and more money from making $100,000 and then making 200 or 300. It's it was a meaningful improvement in those early years. The challenges for me started to pop up when I was probably 4 or 5 years into it, when I first started to feel this sensation that I could map out my entire life and basically be doing the same version of what I'm doing currently without really needing to learn or expand myself in a whole ton of ways. That was one. The second piece was I noticed that so much of the entire industry, the entire network, everything about the people that I was constantly surrounding myself with was based around this measurement stick of just money, where everyone stacked themselves up on the basis of their compensation, their bonus, the houses, the cars, these fancy things. And I noticed from a very early stage that a lot of the things that people would brag about or that people seem to measure themselves around were not things that I really cared about. Yeah. I grew up spending a month out of the year in India, right? Devastating levels of poverty. Spending time. Most of my dad's research and work as a professor was in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. I spent time around very different life than what I was raised. And that instilled in me an understanding that the world that I live in is not the world that everyone experiences. And I've always, from a young age, had this thing in the back of my head of understanding that, the opportunity playing field is not even. And anything that you can do to help even the opportunity playing field long-term is sort of a meaningful impact that you can create on the world. And I'm all for unequal outcomes because I think that people's effort and things that they put in should matter. But even opportunity, right? Everyone should have an opportunity to create uneven outcomes. And
nice.
I would just say that there was a divergence around maybe year 4 or 5 where I started to know that this wasn't the path for me, but I didn't have an off-ramp. And the more and more you stay, the more gravity there is to staying because of the way the compensation works.
And one more title up, and one more thing up, and one more investment will come back. Well, one more, it's very enticing. I think in some sense, it's a lot easier to stay than to do anything else.
Yeah, I think the way I've said it recently is that the worst thing in the world is not being on a bad path. The worst thing in the world is being on a good path that isn't yours.
Right.
The bad path screams at you every single day that you have to get off. You wake up in the morning and there's all these forces saying you have to get off this path. You have to do something else for whatever reason. But the good path that isn't yours is much more subtle. There are a whole lot of forces telling you that you should stay. Reasons that you should stay, responsibilities, demands, all of these things that are telling you pats on the back, that are telling you that it is the right path, that you should stay.
And this is normal. It's normal to not why do you want to be happy all the time? You're making good money. You have a home. You have a family. What more do you want? Right. There's a little bit of that.
People will never step off for that reason. It is It is much easier to just stay on the path than it is to step off that good one.
And I love that, and I love what the way you said it. But also, if I'm looking statistically at our, at Leap Academy, I think most of our clients, I would say probably 80% will say that they're stuck. They're not, oh my God, I can't survive. I'm going to be homeless. It's more of, I feel stuck in my career. I don't know how to get out of that stuckness, right? And I think that's just such a good way to say it, because again, like you said, it's like, it's easier when, okay, like I need a job right now. Like that's different than I've been on this path and maybe it was the wrong, I think you talk about it. Like I climbed the mountain, but it was the wrong mountain or something. I think I heard it somewhere, but I mean, it's like, so at what point, and I think, at what point do you decide, okay, like that's it. Like I need to do something. Maybe I don't know what, but something drives you to start taking action.
Yeah, it's funny. I have this idea that breakthroughs rarely feel like breakthroughs in the moment. Right. Generally speaking, breakthroughs are something that we identify with the benefit of hindsight. So we reflect on our lives 10 years later, 5 years later, and we say like, oh, that was the breakthrough. Like for me, that conversation that I had in May of 2021 when the friend said that was the breakthrough, right? Like that was the thing. And then we had the conversation and made the change. Right. The reality is that there were like 1,000 tiny actions in the basically year leading up to that made that breakthrough moment possible. And the reason I articulate that is because I think for anyone out there listening to this is really important, which is to recognize this leap of faith, like leaving this good path that isn't yours. If you are on that, if you heard me say that and you're listening to this and you're like, that's me, I'm on the good path that doesn't feel like mine, you are not going to solve that in a day. You're not going to just hear this, listen to this podcast and say like, well, that's it, I'm out, jumping ship, leaving my safe job and I'm going to go figure it out, right? That is terrifying. That leap of faith is terrifying. I deconstructed that problem in my own mind, again, with the benefit of hindsight, but I think this formula can really help someone out there, which is just to say, the reason that leap of faith feels so scary is because of two asymmetries. You have an information asymmetry, meaning you have a ton of information about what your life currently looks like and no information about what your life will look like on the other side, and an evidence asymmetry, meaning you have a ton of evidence about how you can live your life, the responsibilities, the bills you can pay, all of the things that you can do where you currently are, and you have no evidence of your ability to do that on the other side. What those two asymmetries manifest as is this huge gap, this endless expanse where you're standing on the edge of a cliff, you look down, you're like, there's nothingness down below, and there's something way off in the distance, and I'm just supposed to jump? Like, no way, I'm gonna stay on the path, right? And those two asymmetries, that is a solvable problem. And it is solvable through gathering information and creating evidence. What I had done over the course of a year, without knowing it, was exactly that. I had gathered information on a daily basis. While COVID was happening, I was spending time talking to hundreds of different people about their paths, different paths that were out there. And I was creating evidence. I was writing every single day. I didn't know that writing was going to be a thing that I was going to go build a career out of, but I knew that it gave me a ton of energy. So I was doing it every single day. And slowly, people started being willing to pay me for certain things. I saw little consulting opportunities coming up. I saw that my newsletter could monetize. There were all of these things that started to create evidence in my mind that I might be able to live a life. Like I might actually be able to replace my income. I could pay some bills. And that built up to the point where that conversation happened in May of 2021, the breakthrough moment. And the leap of faith felt like a little step. I was like, okay, I'm ready for this. I've actually unknowingly made this leap, made it feel like a little step. And so for anyone that's listening, that's feeling like they're on that good path that isn't theirs, think about today. You listen to this. What is some tiny thing that you can do that is either gathering more information about what that other path is or creating evidence about your ability to live there? That could be as simple as like having a conversation with someone, doing some online research, sketching out a plan of how you're going to, create some evidence, the new business you might want to build a landing page, get your first customer. These tiny things that feel completely inconsequential on their own stack up over hundreds and hundreds of days.
And I love that because I think it's the whole notion of burn the boats versus in the moment, which for me, it's more about how do I get really intentional, strategic about figuring this out versus burning the boats. I'm going to burn the boats when I'm ready to burn the boats, when I build enough evidence, when I have enough information, when I created enough of a brand for myself that I actually make sense to burn the boats.
Yeah, I've never really understood the idea of burn the boats. Look, I think when you when you make the change, you burn the boats. And like with the breakthrough, you burn the boats. And what I mean by that is like at that point, once you've gathered enough information and gotten enough evidence, you burn the boats in the sense that like you go all in on this new thing.
Right.
But getting to the point where you are ready to burn the boats is a totally different story. That could take a year. It could take 3 months. It could take a month. But you need to get to the point where you are totally like where you have made that feel like a little scary, not like the most terrifying thing in the world.
Like a huge jump. But talk to me then, at some point you need to burn the boats from private equity, big pays, very, lots of status. Like it comes with a lot of, oh my God. Like how do people react to it? How did you react to it? Like, I'm curious.
Yeah, I've never been someone that cared about what other people thought about me. So that's number one.
Okay.
Part of that's from the
That's
baseball.
a good trait.
Well, part of that's from the
trait.
baseball, right? Like I was a pitcher, so spotlight was constantly on you. You were going to fail miserably at times. And I have always kind of just been of the belief that like someone's always going to have some issue with you. There's always going to be someone out there saying that you're an idiot, saying that you did the wrong thing, whatever it is. And as long as I am happy with like my few people, I don't really care. And as I got more comfortable with who I was, as my insecurities started to get chipped away at, I got even more so entrenched in that belief and self-confidence. So that was really helpful. I would say that like there were two reflections I had. One, most people that had sort of been with me on the prior path, like working in finance, I was rising through the ranks, things seemed to go well. From the outside looking in, and I think from a lot of their perspective, I was winning the game. And I think most of them probably just assumed that I burned out and that I needed a break. And, the family reasons for moving back closer to family, I think that sort of all lined up to say like, oh, worked really hard for 7 years, kind of burned out. And, in hindsight, looking back on it, what I would say is that a lot of those people that I spent time with, some of them that I thought were really close friends, not at my employer, but like people that, I had been around that were sort of friends in that prior life, weren't really my friends. They sort of liked a version of me that was this like sort of fake. Like I had created this persona of this like high flying finance guy. That wasn't really me. Like I don't really care about that kind of stuff. I mean, I wear a running watch. Like I don't care.
Hey,
about,
me too.
Yeah, nice. I don't really care. And I want to spend, I don't need hundreds of friends. I want to spend time with a few people that I'm really like value and mission aligned with. And I'd sort of come to that realization in my own life. And so I didn't really mind that I kind of lost friends in this change. I sort of, and I'm sure you deal with this a lot with people through Leap Academy of like, when you are trying to drive for growth or change in your life, a tax on that growth is loneliness.
Oh, yeah.
You are going to experience loneliness because you changed, but your environment didn't. So you are quite literally not going to be speaking the same language as a lot of the people that were in your previous life.
Right.
And some of them will understand that and you'll continue to have a relationship with them. Some of them won't. And you have yet to attract the new people on the other side of this change. And so that can manifest as this like extended season of loneliness that if you fight, it makes it way worse. It's like quicksand. All of these changes, these sort of signs of personal growth, they are like quicksand. If you try to fight them and resist them and push back, they only pull at you harder and get worse. And when you lean into them and you embrace them and you recognize them as a sign of the progress that you are making in life, your entire life gets better. And you can just sit with them and realize that like, this is the journey. I am really in it right now.
Oh my God, this is so important. So first of all, I wish I had your thick skin. I think I need a little bit of that dose. But I think, speaking of, when you are out there and you alluded to it a little bit, right? I mean, yes, first of all, some of your friends and network are seeing a different person, but also I think it's easier to hate. It's easier to get, other things that maybe, again, maybe as a, when you're playing sports, you felt some of this, but I think it's so easy to get hate now and get various remarks. So do you just brush them off?
Yeah, I turn to my baseball experience. Like I do think um I am much better at brushing things off now than I used to be. I personally have learned to default to a level of empathy when it comes to hate. Uh,
Yeah.
Main reason is like I've never met a person who spends time hating on others that I wanted to trade
Right.
lives with.
That's true.
I've never like I've never come across someone, and sometimes I'll spend time with someone who has all the success in the world, super wealthy, doing great. That you bring someone up, and the first thing that comes out of their mouth is negative, talking down about someone, and my reaction is always like, "Why are you so
Why?
insecure? Like, what? It has never made you look good to talk badly about someone else. It never like knocks them down and brings you up. It doesn't do that." And so
Mm,
I have just learned to just say, like, sometimes hate and criticism
that's
has a
great.
seed of truth. And what I will say is that the ones that hurt the most are generally speaking the ones where there's a seed of truth. There's some piece of feedback that maybe you need to sort of come down from the emotional reaction and then, kind of recognize and
Really ask what
understand.
it is.
And so it
Mhm.
is helpful, I would say, to just like be able to recognize when a piece of negativity comes your way and you feel like this really sharp reaction to it. Generally speaking, it's because there's some seed of truth. If you
Something.
were to call me fat, if you were like, "Hey, you're really fat," that would not impact me at all because I'm not fat. Like definitively, I just know that I'm not fat. And
Right. I
so
mean, by the way, for those seeing it on YouTube, yes.
yeah, like I just
That's ridiculous.
but you know what I mean? Like it's just
Yeah.
it
There's
is
things
it
that will just don't matter.
but
Yeah.
if you said something to me like you never have any original thoughts. That I'm like, oh, I have like a natural visceral. I'm like, well, I don't know. Nothing's, there's very few original
Right.
thoughts in the world because Aristotle probably, like we're building on the shoulders of, like I would have this natural reaction to fight back. The reason is because that is something that I think about where I'm like,
Right.
I need to like continue to refine and think about like what are the novel frameworks that I can
Right.
really build myself rather than just riffing on things that exist. And it's helpful to recognize those because then you can really make
Yeah.
progress. But if we just
Ooh, I
default to
love
the
that.
emotional reaction, we try to write everything off as irrelevant or useless or like screw the haters, you miss out on some valuable signal that exists within all that noise.
Oh, I love that. Now, speaking of you said something about phases, and I want to go there. Your son, if I'm not mistaken, was born a few years ago, right?
Mhm.
And how is that? I mean, I'm a big believer that life is in phases. I think you talk a little bit about those phases. I think we also have different priorities in different phases of our life. How did that impact your thinking?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in this idea. I call it seasons. And
Yeah.
my fundamental belief around seasons and why it's been such an impactful concept for both my wife and I is this recognition that what you prioritize or focus on during any one season can and should probably change.
Right.
And with that recognition is the understanding that you needn't be held or tied to what your focus was the prior season, nor do you need to stress or have anxiety over what your focus might be in the next season, in a future
Right.
season. You can really just ride and live in the present moment and make decisions that will sort of optimize for where you currently are. The most salient example of that in our life was this, understanding my wife and I both had that we really wanted to prioritize presence and energy
Right.
while our kids are young and being at home during that period as much as possible and really building this foundational relationship and trust with our kids was important to us. And so
Right.
building our life around that, part of that was that my wife wanted to take time off work. And there are sacrifices to be made around that in other areas of life. but doing so with the recognition that it doesn't tie you to that for the rest of your life. That doesn't mean that you are now a stay-at-home mom for the rest of your life. It means that while your kids are young and not in school, maybe that's going to be your focus, and that season may come to an end. Maybe it won't, but maybe it will. And that has been a really transformative idea for us because it kind of liberates you to just think in segments. You don't need to think for the 50-year horizon, the 10-year, the 15-year plan. You can really think in these like shorter chunks.
Right. I love it. And I think you have a few names for them, like foundation, compounding, family, purpose, retirement. And for me, we also talk a lot about experimenting with, what's critical for you and then experimenting with what's the right thing for you. But again, looking at it as a smaller chunk because we're going to reinvent ourselves every year or two. So, we're totally aligned on how we're looking at it. So I loved when I looked at that. So what inspired you then to write the 5 types of wealth? Like, it sounds like it's all of that together, but were you just like, oh my God, I have to write this down? Or like you took like a lot of the things from Twitter and suddenly you're reading, like writing a book? Like how did that come about?
There was so much that was transformed in my own life from this idea of measuring according to the things that you truly care about. We saw the transformation in our life over the course of a year, from the life we were living where my wife and I were struggling to conceive, experiencing strain in our relationship around that for the first time to, a year later, having this beautiful little boy born, living close to our families, having this incredible joy and fulfillment in our work and in the things that we're focusing on, having better health, mental and physical, over the course of 1 year, right? From May of 2021, when I had that conversation, when I was like as miserable as I'd been in my life, to May of 2022, when my son was born and we brought him home from the hospital and both of our sets of parents are there cheering in the driveway. Like it was, almost unbelievable, right? Like 1 year. And I just started to think to myself, I have to share this with the world because people need, you sort of know these ideas in the back of your mind, but the problem is that awareness is perishable. So you might know something in a moment, but if you don't know it in the moment, it's not useful awareness. You need to be able to understand and recognize something at the testing point of that thing. And for that to be the case, you need a framework, like you need a name to put to the thing. And so my whole thought was, people know these things, they're floating around in their head. Oh, time is really precious. Relationships are so important. Your health, like all these things, you kind of know it, but it needs to be handed to people so that they can actually operationalize it in their life, so that they can take it, make decisions with it, proactively design their life with it, measure the right things, start taking the right actions. And I was called to share it because I had experienced the value of it in my own journey.
That's incredible. And again, did you realize how the book will take off? So, it's been a phenomenal, like I have to say, like it's incredible.
Yeah, I don't think you ever really know. And there was an enormous amount of anxiety with publishing, my first book, putting something out into the world that's so permanent because, everything I had done before was social media or my newsletter. And, a social media post or a newsletter post, at most, it is relevant for, 48 hours. And then people have moved on. So nothing is really that permanent, good or bad. And so there's a lot of anxiety of putting something out into the world and saying, this is here. And if people hate it, and if the reviews are terrible, it's here. And if it's good, maybe it'll be an amazing thing and really sticky. And my whole thought was like, you don't gift a newsletter to someone. Like you can't give a newsletter to someone for their graduation. You can't give a newsletter to someone for Christmas, right? But you can give a book. So I was like, what? Like this concept, this idea, I know it needs to exist in the world. And I didn't know how it would be received. I didn't know that there would be all these people that would come and support, for no benefit to them. And I've been pretty blown away. We're, just coming in on 4-ish months maybe since release, and almost 300,000 copies I think sold around the world.
Incredible.
I'm really blown away.
That's incredible because that's a different level of impact.
I think the most important part of that, by the way, is the numbers kind of just disappear into like anonymity. There's some like terrible version of this quote that it might be like Joseph Stalin or someone said that like one person dies, it's a tragedy. A million people die, it's a statistic. And the sort of good version of that same idea also applies, which is like, impacting one person feels very meaningful. When you hear these big numbers like social media followers, likes, shares, views, whatever, they fade into oblivion in your own mind. I'm like, 300, I don't know what that means. And the thing that's really impactful to me is getting the emails and hearing the stories from people about real actions that they've taken on the back of reading the book. Like, I decided to spend more time with my family, and then my mom got diagnosed with something, and we created all these moments and memories prior to her passing. And like, it's been 3 months. So I cannot imagine the ripple effect of this when you play it out over a long time. And for me in my own life and in my own journey, if I had wanted to just make the most amount of money, I would have stayed on the path I was on. Right. What I care about is impact. I care about feeling like I'm leaving a positive impact on people's lives. And for me to hear those stories from people, see and experience those stories, get those pictures from people, I mean, I can't imagine something more enriching in my career and in my professional experience.
I mean, I would agree. And I think we share some of this. For me, it's in a different version of it, but I can totally understand. Because again, like I was on the path of tech, like that would probably make me more money, but this is like massively more impactful. Okay. So like right now, if I'm just like, there's some amazing things about, being an entrepreneur, but there's some less amazing things. Can we talk a little bit about some of the less amazing things? Because I think some people are like, right now, you're talking to an audience that like, they're going to soak all of this in. Like, so this is amazing. But I think a lot of them are like, what do I want to do? Do I just want to go up the ladder in my own world? Do I want to start entrepreneurship? I also believe in portfolio career, like multiple streams of income. I think some people will create some things on the side to create that impact, even if they are in the same area. But what are the things that are not as fun or a lot more challenging that you think?
How much time you got? No, I look, there are a lot of things. I'd say the first thing that I would say is everyone says they want freedom, but most people don't actually want freedom. They want the illusion of freedom, or the kind of like Disney fairy tale version of freedom. The reality of freedom is that it is very, very scary and very, very challenging, because real freedom, what we're talking about here, is being up in the middle of the night, recognizing that if you don't do this thing, it is not going to happen. Real freedom is everything falling on you, and you needing to eat what you kill. And the whole myth of the like 4-hour work week. It's just not, maybe a few people are able to pull it off, but it is not reality for the vast majority. Right. If you go down the entrepreneurial path, I would say you have to get comfortable with the idea that you're going to work more for less money. And if you outperform that, that is fantastic. But if you're comfortable with that because you are going to be so fulfilled by controlling your own destiny, then it is certainly for you. I think this whole idea that you can set out on this path and like all you have to do is bet on yourself and then you'll make way more money and work way less hours, it's just not real. And thinking that going in, you're going to be very disappointed very quickly and get discouraged. And so I think that being realistic with yourself about why you are doing this thing and what it means to you to go and do this is important. The other thing I would say is the single greatest challenge I had, and that I think most people have when they switch from a traditional path to a non-traditional, is the lack of structure. Lack of structure manifests as a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, a lot of tension. This is like on your prior path, you knew what you had to do all times a day. You had all these meetings, you had emails, you had all sorts of stuff you had to do, all this. You were being told exactly what you needed to do. You switch to this path, entrepreneurial path.
No one's telling you. Make it up.
Yeah, no one's telling you what to do. You wake up in the morning, you're like, what do I do today? I don't know. And so and what happens is, stress and anxiety feed on idleness. So if you have nothing on your calendar and you're just sitting there like, I don't know what to do, you are going to start feeling that build. And they are solved, that idleness is fixed by creating structure, by having action that you are taking. And what you find is that creates momentum. You start keeping promises to yourself. That builds confidence. It creates movement. That builds motivation. All of these things start to happen on the back of creating some level of structure. So whenever I advise anyone on, making this leap, making a change in their life, the first thing I say is just sketch out some level of structure to what you're going to be doing during different blocks of the day. That could be as simple as I'm going to wake up at 5 and I'm going to go work out for an hour. And then I'm going to, do this. Then I'm going to do customer calls. Then I'm going to do, new research, whatever. Just sort
Sir,
of time.
Can we do 7 instead of 5 though?
You can do whatever you want. Whatever you want. Whatever works.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah. I love the early morning wake up personally because before my son's awake. But yeah. And then look, the last thing I will say is it is a very lonely path. And I think that you need to be, again, it goes back to the quicksand thing. It is important to recognize that going in and to not resist it. Because being willing to sort of grind through that valley of loneliness, you find an unbelievable enriching set of relationships on the other side of it, if you are willing to grind through that period. People that are on that same journey, that understand you in a deeper way, that understand these challenges that you faced, and that can help you. And that is such an amazing thing when you find it.
Oof, I love that. And I think it's so important to surround yourself with people who are closer to where you want to go versus where you've been, right? Because otherwise it just doesn't work. You get exactly what you talked about. So if somebody's listening to this, and I'm sure they're getting so much out of this, but they're feeling stuck, they're feeling like, I need a change. If you need to kind of get yourself back in time to whatever, 2020 or 2021, what would you say to yourself?
I think I would just sit down and ask myself, what is one tiny thing that I can do today that creates a little bit of momentum? And it doesn't need to be the right thing, quote unquote. It doesn't need to be the perfect thing. It just needs to be something. Because what I have found over and over again is that fear is an interesting experience. Fear is really about inexperience, not incapability. You are afraid because you haven't done it yet, not because you can't do it. And that means that fear is solvable through action, through doing the thing, through having the courage to take action. And that action doesn't have to be right. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be something. You have to sit down and make some tiny action. You have to solve one problem. And anyone can do that where they are today. And so if you have started to think that there is a different path for you, just as I had, sit down and think about what is one tiny thing that I can do today that will leave me slightly better off tomorrow than where I am. And it could be 15 minutes, it could be 5 minutes, but structure a little bit of time to solve one of those problems every single day, and you'll be blown away by the momentum that creates over longer periods.
I love this because I think one of the things that paralyze people is the overthinking. I need to get the clarity. I can't move until I know exactly how the path is going to form. And what I love about this, again, the clarity comes from action and from the momentum. And the way you started just writing about it, et cetera, like that clarity kicked in, right? So I think that is just so important because I think this is like such a fundamental area where there's a lot of procrastination around it.
Yeah, my favorite quote of all time is the ancient poet Rumi, who said, "As you start to walk on the way appears." As you start to walk on the way appears. I think that more of us need to approach our entrepreneurial journey or our life with sort of an explorer's mentality, to say, you cannot plan the perfect journey. You can't think your way to the perfect path. Right. There's no 10-year, 15-year plan. There is only action that starts to reveal the path in front of you.
I love that. Sahil Bloom, that 5 types of wealth. This is amazing. Thank you for being on the show. That was amazing.
Thank you so much for having me.
More episodes that you're going to love are right around the corner. So definitely make sure to click the like button and subscribe to our channel. Also, who in your life should see this today? do share this with them. This will inspire and help those you care about and helps us continue to bring amazing guests. And I will see you there.